Welcome back. I'm playing Warhammer 40,000 Dark Crusade, and today I thought I'd make a guide on how to successfully complete the Necron campaign if you are having difficulty with this game. Overall, it's actually a pretty easy campaign, I would say, in terms of comparison to the other factions. The big thing is this is your starting base here. And so you effectively, when you're first starting, you can only move one square at a time. And so you have to decide how you want to be moving around here. So you can capture neutral territories, and you can get these honor guard, which are units you'll start with when you're doing a skirmish campaign, because unless you're going for one of these unique resource locations or trying to take out an enemy commander location, these will all just be skirmish missions. Now, the thing to know is if you're going to be doing a place where you're going to be capturing it and you think you're going to keep getting attacked by an enemy faction, because as you can see, the Chaos is the only one that's left here. The rest of the planet is under my control. But this little icon here is where their army is. Mine's up here. And then you'll move one square unless you have the spaceport, which allows you to deploy anywhere on the map that's not a HQ Stronghold. Or if you end up capturing the Fury here, which allows you to attack 2 times per turn, or have 2 actions per turn is probably a better way of saying that, versus just 1 per turn, then these armies will move around. And let's say Chaos was to come here and attack me, then I'd have to do a defensive mission. Now, what's nice about Dark Crusade, which really makes it not as much of a slog as, say, Soulstorm, is every time you have to deploy on a map, if you've built things up on that map, it'll still be there when you return. Now, the downside of that is if you're getting beaten up and they're destroying your territories, and you're going to get weakened over time. But again, if you have to survive at least, or you have to defend at least 5 times to get all 3 pieces of defensive war gear, and you definitely want to get war gear for your heroes to make them stronger. So let's say I was going to just farm these guys for attacks. I'd want to reinforce these locations here that they were fighting, because I'd spend a little more time up front on the skirmish mission, build up a base, get some good requisition, power plants up, because I'm the Necron, so I don't have requisition. I just have obelisks that will allow me to decrease my research time and increase my production speed when I'm making units. But that'll make it really easy, so you can just quickly spam out those defensive missions. And then the other thing you can do is you can reinforce and put down a garrison, which will be an army on these locations. So not only can you be building up your bases, but you could get an army. Now, I typically just got a little bit of a stronger base going, and then I was able to easily defend it, so I didn't have to spend the resources on the garrisons. Because one of the downsides on this game is if you're going to play like me and you're going to be super aggressive, you're going to be blowing through a lot of resources, so you're probably not going to have everything to be able to deploy full armies here. But I will show an example of a base that is pretty strong and built up, just to give you an idea of how the defensive missions can go so well if you end up just building up the territory, because then you can end up defeating the defensive mission in 5 minutes, and then you get your war gear and you're just done. And you may find that certain factions are easier to farm, like the Necrons are incredibly powerful against the Imperial Guard, so I was farming their attacks here by just keeping them here, because once you knock them into their base, they can only attack this location here. So I just would keep building it up, because I didn't have this under my control for a while. I had to let Chaos and them fight. And so if they wanted to come out here, they would just keep fighting me, and I'd have this whole area set up. And then the enemy bases are always in the same locations on these skirmish missions. So if you want to know where the bases are, you can watch my videos, and I'll show you where every base is, as I was capturing the whole planet with every one of my playthroughs here to get all the honor guard, and then also show where all the locations are. Because once you get an idea of where the bases are, you can just totally steamroll things, and it goes really, really quick for you. Alright, and then this will be an example of a defensive mission, so you can see I'm getting attacked here. Now, my army's not around, so I won't start with a hero nor have an honor guard. So as you can see, I already have some buildings set up here in addition to the requisition points. You do have to re-research everything that's there, and then because the enemy bases are always going to be in the same location, you would typically want to have this reinforced more, but for whatever reason I must not have thought about this getting counterattacked here. So I always rush getting our hero going, and then because he's got a fire prism, that's going to knock us out. So I wanted to get a couple of immortals out to help us with the anti-vehicle killing. And then with the Necrons, it typically makes a lot of sense to have a second monolith so you can just pump out all your guys right away. But as you can see, he's attacking me with his army, so he has the advantage here because he has a whole army, whereas we do not. So we need to take these vehicles out and then try to take out the rest of these guys. But as you can see, it's actually kind of a difficult setup for us because they're beating us back and disrupting our forces so much. And then the other thing to be aware of is it's not until your 3rd tier level with your obelisk that you get them to start attacking. So again, it's important to have your turrets up, but I can end up sacrificing these guys here because once I get the resurrection orb going, I can then resurrect all those guys that have been killed, so that's not as big of an issue here. And then the obelisk, once you get it to level 2, does get that disruption ability. But as you can see, they did beat us back a little bit, and this is very late into the game, so they have full armies that they're starting out with, whereas we're trying to scramble to get everything up and running. Now, this is a map that I did not have fully kitted out here, but again, everything I build during this mission, as long as it's not killed, will stick around for the following defensive missions here. So spending a little extra time to get this up and running will definitely help us out. And then with that archive, we can get the artifacts out. And then we're starting to get those resurrection orbs, so I'm trying to bring him back to base here so we can start resurrecting these guys. And now you can see we actually have 27 out of 24, so by using that reanimation protocol, we actually have more units than we should be able to with our squad caps. Now, if you really wanted to min-max this, what you could do is capture the strategic command points around the enemy base starting locations, and you would just build all your turrets in there, and then the enemy attacking you would actually have to fight out of all of your turrets, and that would hold the line there while you're getting your units up and running. I didn't actually do that because I didn't find it to be necessary, but if you truly wanted to be the most harassing and annoying player, that is something that you could end up doing to usually use it to your advantage. But I tend to just take places around there, get a little turret defensive line by my base, and that way by the time they get to me, I can start defending and start attacking here, because this is going to be kind of the most challenging attack force that you're going to have. A late game army with all of their war gear, and also having the full honor guard attacking me without an army, and then they have 2 elite tier bases here, so they're just beating us back. And again, with the Necrons, it doesn't so much matter if our guys get killed, because we can always just reanimate and bring our army back. And then with our Necron Lord, he can just be reanimated wherever he dies and just start right back up where he was. So we can get these guys taken out. Now, as you can see there, those Rangers were infiltrated, and since our Necron Lord is our detector unit, I was not able to kill those Rangers, so they just kept shooting into my guys until he got reanimated and is able to start acting as a detector again. But as we're sitting here pushing, we're getting more upgrades. We're actually building up our bases a little bit here. So we're making this even stronger for the next time that we have to hold the battle line here. Now, technically, you only have to run and take out the Stronghold, and you should get the win as long as they don't build another one. But with the Eldar, they can actually be a little bit challenging, so it's like I'd rather just take everybody down and keep pushing as we're going. Now, once you have your area fortified, then effectively every time you're attacked, you'll want to then start running around the map and building up those obelisks, so the AI's economy will be dramatically weakened, because for them, they really need to get those requisition points under their control to get the requisition to help them build armies, whereas for us, we're getting all of our resources just out of the power plants at our base. And by getting 2 monoliths or more, not only are we getting multiple buildings to make an army going, but we're able to make more power plants to then make it even better for us when we have to do our next defensive mission. So that's kind of how you'd end up going about this to really reinforce this the best. And there you can see we have victory. So that's what I'd recommend for defensive missions here. This is another kind of setup here
where it's going to be a very easy situation. So it's just kind of capturing units on my side here, building up power plants, getting out the Necron Lord because he's so powerful, he can hold the line. And then once you've got a situation like this where you're not having to deal about a whole honor guard, then even just going with a Tomb Spider army here can help you take out buildings even easier. I don't have a strong enough economy going that I felt that I could get the filleted ones going, because that's another option. You just run over and start deploying the filleted ones in the enemy base. But typically early on, especially against factions that don't have full honor guards attacking us like the Eldar was doing there, just going with these Tomb Spiders here is highly effective, because they're not going to have the defensive units to fight off those spiders. And then the other benefit, just like the Necron Lord, is when they end up getting killed, you just build them again and they just get right back up where they were destroyed. And so if that's in the middle of the enemy's base, well, then you just saved yourself a bunch of distance that you have to travel. And then just slowly upgrading each one of these obelisks as you keep pushing every time to make them little defensive bastions here, and pushing into the enemy forces here, getting some kills as we continue to upgrade our base and get things going. So the big thing with Dark Crusade is once you take out the enemy strongholds, you'll get victory. Now against the Imperial Guard, you'll want to focus on taking those factories down, because if they start making what are those guys called? Sentinels. Those have big las cannons on them, and they actually do a shocking amount of damage to our vehicles. So you want to make sure you take those guys out so they don't have access to strong anti-vehicle units. So you can just sit back and destroy their base like what I'm doing here. And now it's like, okay, we've already taken out a faction, and it's been like, what, 3 minutes? So not an issue at all, and we just keep pushing. And then we've already got enough obelisks going that we're building at 100% speed. We're researching. We've got a strong enough economy now that I can just drop these filleted ones in the middle of their base, and then you can just have the Tomb Spiders keep attacking the stronghold there, and we have victory. So that's the fastest, most effective way to get your bases defended if you're playing as the Necrons. So I hope that helps and gives you some ideas.
In terms of how I recommend going about the missions here, since you start out here, I usually like to creep out to the Van der Mar Mountains, because that'll get me some Crypt Warriors honor guards, and then I would come up and take the spaceport. Now, if you watch my playthrough for the space part, this isn't it's normally be like, oh man, you really want to do a difficult mission this early. This isn't like a standard mission, because it's a spaceport and it's a special objective. So you actually have to run around the map and capture servitors. And the first person that captures enough servitors just automatically wins. So you need to... Actually, the ironic, the first time as you're doing this, you're probably going to be spending more time just making an army to be running all around the map, trying to capture as many servitors as you possibly can. And when you attack an enemy base, especially the one in the center there, they usually have 1 or 2 servitors there, so you can usually get the win. And then unfortunately, if anybody attacks you at a later time, then you have to do this mad scramble where you got to rapidly build up this location, because once you've captured it, you don't do that servitor race again. Then it just goes back to being a skirmish map. So just be aware of that. But that will allow you to easily take the spaceport early on, and you'll be hitting way above your pay grade here. You're hitting above your weight class, is I guess a more traditional way of saying that, because now you can deploy to any location. And so what I like to do is rapidly then start getting these special traits. So from here, you'll end your turn, and then I would deploy down to get the Fury, so I can get the ×2 actions every turn. And then I come down and either do the increased manpower, which allows you to have slightly more units that you can build above the cap for your vehicles and your infantry, or if there's an army down here and you're worried about aggroing them, coming up here and get the industrial production, because this effectively will give you 1,000 extra energy to use at the start of any skirmish mission. So that's effectively enough energy for you to get an army out and to start making some production, to at least have some basic building. So after you complete the skirmish mission, you can keep pushing through, and that can make it highly effective for you. So I'll show just kind of a basic setup for a skirmish mission here, and then you can see kind of what I mean by taking that. All right, so here's an example of attacking a base here. You can see you can select your honor guard, and then below there was the buildings that you'll get when you get access to the forward base if you want to get those deployed. I do have this kind of sped up a little bit. So what I like to do is I'll send one of the scarabs that I'll start out with and then just start capturing some locations. Then I'll max out the scarabs that I'm making, so that way they can focus on generating these power plants so we can get our energy going. And then I'll send our Necron Lord and our hero out to start scouting the map to try to figure out where the enemy bases are. Now, if you've watched my playthrough, you should know where the enemy bases are on all these different maps, and you can reinforce the scarabs for free. Then what I tend to do after I get all the scarabs out, because it takes a long time to get these power plants built up, is I then start to get some Necron warriors. Now, because I've run into the army down here, I know the enemy base must be down this way here, so we're trying to get our army over here. Now, this is a little bit later into the game, so our Necron Lord has most of his war gear. So as you can see, he's like tanking that entire army while we're waiting for our other units to get closer. And then we can create these Necron warriors and get unlimited amounts of them for free. And then we only have to pay costs for reinforcing those squads. And then what I do is I just continue to send that one scarab running around the map to be capturing locations, and then I'll start building other buildings to get this place built up a little bit for if we get a counterattack. So I'll always get the summoning core, because that allows you to start upgrading your damage and HP for your warriors, making them more powerful. And I'm making those obelisks here because, as you can see in the left upper corner there, it's at 40%. So we're getting 40% bonuses here for where our default research speed is, our production, everything like that. So I want to try to get that all the way up to 100%, because capturing those requisition points with the Necrons does not give us any resources. It just increases those research speeds, and then it also increases our caps for both our vehicles and our infantry. So as you can see, the 9 out of 21 is what our infantry cap is, and then the 0 out of 13 is our vehicle. And then the green down there that's going up at plus 60 is the energy generation, because every one of these buildings that is alive when we end up completing the mission will be available if we get attacked. And that includes whatever level our monolith is, unless we get it to the awaken, then we don't get to keep that for the next one. And then you completed the mission here. So pretty basic. That's kind of your general recommendation for pushing through. Now, going forward, after I've taken that and this, it is nice to get the forward base, but I actually find this to be one of the hardest skirmish maps in the game, because you have to take out 3 enemy bases with just a starting army, and they give you a super elite army, I should say. But if you're unsuccessful, then it's just an all or nothing situation. And so even if you take out like 2 out of the 3 bases, when you do it again, you still have all 3 bases that you got to take out. And then what makes it even worse is it's almost always being held by the orcs, which means all those buildings are going to end up having turrets and everything on there. Now, what's nice about the Necrons is you can then use your Necron lords to then control the looted tanks that'll be there, and that can give you some really nice units. And then because you're just doing energy, you can typically reinforce your units a little bit better, and because you get 2 Necron monoliths, you can then make unlimited warriors, because those are free for creating, just not free to reinforce. So that, out of all the factions, I think the Necrons are probably the easiest one to take this one, but I would typically recommend that you wait until you've captured more of these central locations before you try to do that one, because you're also not going to have enough requisition to even take advantage of the forward base trait. And what that is it allows you to spend resources when you're attacking another map location, or more importantly, HQ Stronghold. You can then put buildings down in exchange for your for your requisition. So usually you can get, like your archive to help you get your unique items for your Necron Lord. You can get 4 power plants. I think you can get the summoning core. So there's things you can put out to help expedite your battles, which can be especially nice on the Stronghold missions, where you don't want to have to invest, those 800 some resources to get things going. And you now have a big resource buff as the Necrons, because you're using that energy to make all of your units. So that can definitely make your starting missions much, much easier.
Now, the other unique location that I don't really care about is the Bulwark, and I guess the game makers don't really care about this one either, because this is just a pure skirmish map, so there's no unique mechanics here. It's just you go fight the Eldar, who usually almost always have this map location under their control. You take out their bases, and then you get a reduced cost when you're going to be garrisoning troops if you wanted to do that on those defensive missions. But typically, I just save the requisition, just build up those locations a little bit more with, you know, a base or two, capture a bunch of requisition, build some tower turrets, and then you're just going to be ready to just survive an initial onslaught and then just push back right away and get your easy defensive missions. Now, the biggest thing to know about this game is when you are going across doing the campaign, you'll get access to war gear for your hero. And so at the start, it can actually be a little bit harder because your hero is kind of a sissy. But as you start getting him kitted out with the full amount of war gear, he'll become completely overwhelming. And some of the heroes, including the Necron Lord himself, he can almost solo, you know, several units all by himself, because you'll get amazing health benefits, you'll get huge damage buffs, you'll get damage resistance, and then when you start getting him as items that are unique to the Necrons as well, for his war, I want to call it war gear, but I guess artifacts is a better way to say it because it's separate from the war gear, but you can make him into a complete tank, and then he can just sit there and use a resurrection orb and bring your army back from death. So the Necrons are very, very powerful late game. The thing that's super annoying about him is he has a lot of his attacks will be throwing guys around and knocking them down. Now, in games like Dawn of War 2, you can still do damage to units that are on the ground and that have been disrupted, but in this game, when guys are on the ground, they're invulnerable to damage. And so it's nice in that it reduces the amount of damage that a squad is going to be doing while you're throwing them around, but it also can sometimes be very frustrating, because if he keeps knocking him down over and over and over again, it can actually take forever for him to get the kill, because he's effectively dramatically reducing his damage. You know, if he's just sitting there punching the guy in the face the whole time versus throwing him around the map, he'll be doing like 10% of the damage, and so it can take a really long time for you to get a kill. But there is a bug in this game right now when it comes to the war gear. And so usually what you're supposed to do is be able to hover over this, and then you'll be able to see kind of your war gear objectives here. So I'll just tell you what they are. You'll get your first piece of war gear after you do your first mission, because you get 1 for 1 conquest. You get 1 for 1 defense mission. So conquest missions when you're attacking another location. Defense is when you're getting attacked. And then the big thing to know about when you're doing your defensive missions is if you auto-resolve it, that doesn't count as credit as successfully doing a defensive mission. So you have to do at least 5 defenses if you're going to get all 3 war gear pieces with the defensive trait, because you get 1 for 1 defense, 1 for 3 defenses, and 1 for 5 defenses. You then get another piece of war gear when you complete 5 conquests. You get a piece of war gear when you get a 3-to-1 kill ratio. You get the next one when you're getting 2,000 kills. You'll get 1 for 15 conquests. You'll get 1 when you defeat 3 factions, which effectively means taking out 3 enemy strongholds. And then the final war gear is for 5,000 kills. Now, that's not necessarily the order that you're going to be getting that war gear in. You know, if you're not getting attacked, then obviously you're not going to be getting those, or if you're not having to play the defensive missions, then obviously you're not getting those defensive pieces of war gear. And because the AI in this game, especially because if you're playing super aggressive like me and you're using the Fury and getting double attacks, I mean, you're going to be bouncing all over the map and getting kills. So it can actually be a little bit hard for the AI to want to attack you, because what you'll do is just aggressively move around the map. I mean, you certainly don't have to capture the whole planet to easily beat the campaign, but it definitely makes it a lot easier, because you can just once you get a little bit of an honor guard and some more gear, you can just steamroll the skirmish missions, and then you can just jump right into the base sieges. So it's just up to you, whatever you want to do. In terms of the war gear, though, what I recommend in terms of order is I would recommend getting the Death Mask really early, because one of the annoying things in this game is there is infiltrated units, and only certain units can see the infiltrated. So this just nullifies that whole situation, because your Necron Lord is likely going to be moving around with your army anyways, and so then you just have these guys to be able to see infiltrated units, because otherwise you have to use your Scarabs, which are your builders, or you have to use oh shoot, what are those guys called? I have one here. A Wraith, which is a unit that can detect infiltrated units, and those guys I really don't like to use. I'd rather have other armies out, so that just nullifies that whole mechanic, especially if you're going to be fighting the Tau early on, because they have a bunch of stealth suits and other stealth units, and you just don't even have to worry about it. Then I recommend that you come down and you get the reinforced body, because this will significantly reduce the damage he takes in melee, because he's going to be soloing most other heroes that you're going to be fighting, and then your Crypt Warriors and other ranged units will be shooting him from afar, so you want him to be able to sit and tank any melee units while your ranged units are getting kills, and that also dramatically increases his health. From there, I like to make a more defensive tank hero, again, because your units that you get for the Necrons are kind of slow moving, but they're very, very powerful, especially with their ranged attacks. Now, they do have good melee units too, but they can be a little bit more difficult to use, and they're a little more expensive. So really just being able to spam out Crypt Warriors, I think, is the way to go. And so by really buffing them up, by allowing them to just get a bunch of shots, get their damage and damage reduction, and then having the Necron Lord tank everything, I then go with the Death Shroud, because that increases his movement speed, and it also significantly reduces the damage he takes from ranged damage. And so then if you then stack them up with the artifact that you'll get, I think it's called the Phylactery or something, that also reduces the range damage he takes. So those do stack, and now all of a sudden he can just sit there and he can like tank a requisition turret, or just tank a bunch of bolter rounds from the turrets that enemy units can, or any factions will have around their base, and then that will allow him to just sit there and get attacks while the rest of your forces are mopping up the turrets, and can make him become very, very powerful. From there, I usually will start to go into increasing his melee damage, so getting the skinning blades works out really well, and also allows him to do pretty decent morale damage, because in this game, once you break morale from your enemy units, it dramatically reduces their combat effectiveness, and so it becomes really easy to then kill them and mop up other units here, and allow you to just totally steamroll guys. And then I get the Reaping Blades, which gives them more armor piercing, so now he can actually do damage against heavy units and vehicles. So that can be very, very nice. Then I tend to either go with the second armor upgrade, which would be the Mantle of Doom, increasing his health and also increasing his morale, because what you'll find is as you're creeping around the map, there are certain factions that will go sit there and get like a bunch of flamer units. And you'll start to find, as you're getting to be harder missions, that they'll actually start dropping and breaking the Necron Lord's morale as he's sitting there tanking things. And you need him to be keeping his damage output as much as possible. So this will help counteract that if you are finding that they're breaking your morale a lot. The faction that probably does it the most would be the Imperial Guard, because they have quite a few flamer units, and then they also tend to spam their Psychers, and one of the Psychers' ability really does a lot of morale damage while it's doing pretty decent HP damage to you as well. So that can really be a pain in the ass when you're sitting there trying to kill them. Then I tend to get the Death Grip, because this actually increases a significant amount of health and increases your melee damage even further. And then I like to do the Heart of Darkness, because this dramatically increases your health regeneration. And so by now, you're going to be running around having this effective tank. He's going to be taking damage, and it can take him a long-ass time to get his health back. But once you start getting him this Heart of Darkness to rapidly increase his health regeneration, he'll regenerate his health probably like 1% per second, and so you're talking about a couple minutes maybe at most, and he'll regenerate his health and be back up into combat. So then between all of his damage reductions that you're getting with his armors, his Death Shroud, and then this HP regeneration buff, you can just sit there, attack, wait for him to get down to half or quarter health, pull him back, he'll just heal up while the rest of your forces are wiping out their army, and then by then he'll be almost back to full health, and you just keep pushing, and you just kind of do this continual alternating creep. And then if your army gets killed, if you give him the artifact, the Orb of Resurrection, then you just plop that down, and then you just resurrect all of your forces that were wiped out, and you just continue to push. And then by using the Resurrection Orb, it's actually possible that you can push your unit caps actually above the max caps that you're supposed to by a unit or two, and that can be very, very powerful. Now, you can't really get past the vehicle caps, but you can definitely do that for the infantry, so just keep that in mind. So that can become very, very powerful. And then finally, I end it with the range damaged weapon, which would be the Necron tier sigils and then the Gauss Flare. Some people make an argument that because he is so obnoxious with doing melee damage, that it sometimes would actually make sense for you to get the ranged weaponry first, and you just put him into a ranged damage stance, and then he'd just be sitting there shooting from range a lot more. Because once you get this fully upgraded, he actually does pretty decent range damage to anything that's not in a ton of armor, like buildings or vehicles. And so he would actually have a higher damage output using the range damage. But then if you're going to be fighting vehicles or things that aren't getting knocked around, then definitely his reaping blades would be way, way better. Same with killing buildings and things like that. But you could make a strong argument that if you are getting annoyed with him doing very poor damage output, you may want to rush the range damage and just keep him in range stands. But I just like to throw him into melee, even though it really drops down his damage potential because he's throwing guys around and knocking them on their butts, because it just disrupts everybody and allows all of the rest of my ranged units to just get the kills. But that's my general recommendation for the war gear order here, so I hope that clarifies things. And then in terms of your honor guards here, you know, you effectively just pay for them and you get to start the mission with them. As you can see, you get lots of different options here depending on what you need to do. The flayed ones are really high damage output. You're not going to be warping them around the map like you would with a traditional one. That's where they really shine, because you can just effectively create them. Then you would want to deploy them out of your stronghold because they start inside the monolith. But you'd want to actually have them deployed outside the monolith so you can get them reinforced. Then you can actually right click on the monolith and put them back into the monolith, and then you can teleport them anywhere on the map. So if you've already gotten into an enemy base and you're starting to really attack things, then you can just, you know, create these flayed ones and then just start deploying them inside the enemy base and start killing everything. And then these guys are super effective. Just anybody that's around them will start suffering morale damage. So these can actually be very, very powerful because you're going to start breaking everybody's morale. And then if you're fighting a force that focuses on range, like the Imperial Guard or the Tau, these guys have so many models, they just run around and you can just start locking everybody down into melee. The big thing about the pariahs here is every time they hit somebody with their melee weapon, it slows the enemy movement and it lowers their maximum health. So it makes these guys really good at weakening enemy heroes and like knobs and other units that are high HP, so that can be very helpful. These guys are high DPS, so they're really good at like sniping out an enemy hero, but they also are not very durable. Now, if you're really good with your micro, you can use their phase out ability, which makes them immune to damage, and then you can run them away. But for the most part, I find them just a real nuisance, and I don't want to be microing my guys, so I tend to bypass them. The tomb spiders can be really nice. They can allow you to help resurrect and reanimate your infantry that get killed by using their abilities. I generally just use them as a melee fighter because they're extremely good in melee and can really help you take down enemy vehicles and also kill buildings. You do have the potential to exchange out one of their claws, which you would use in melee combat, for a ranged weapon, but I would never recommend doing that. I just keep them in a full melee build because you have enough units here alternatively to help you kill infantry. Like I said, these Crypt Warriors you can make for free, not the Honor Guard versions obviously, and then you only have to pay for the reinforcement. And then as you upgrade your strongholds, you get access to better summoning cores, and you can upgrade these guys twice, which will dramatically increase their damage output and increase their life. So it makes Crypt Warriors good throughout the whole game, which is kind of unusual that your low tier infantry progressively it gets upgraded throughout the game. You also get access to a destroyer, which are surprisingly good at killing infantry because they're very fast. So you can sit there and kill a bunch of infantry. When they're almost dead, you just run them back and you just use your scarabs, which are your builders here, to then heal them back up for free, and then you can get back out. So it's a really cost-effective way to do that if you want to do some hit-and-run tactics. And then your immortals are your basic anti-vehicle, anti-infantry, or anti-vehicle, anti-building units here. They're not the only time you would use them in melee is if you're going to be fighting infantry, but you would never want to do that. I mean, it allows them to effectively defend themselves if they're attacked in infantry, but really these are going to be your guys that you're going to be killing stuff with. And then these are just your frontline tanks, but you can only make one of them when you're getting them kitted out here. So once you complete strongholds, or kill a stronghold, as you can see, you get a head here for each one, and then if you wanted to see what their story was again, you can click it and it'll show you the ending story once you've conquered that area. This allows you to see which of the special locations you've taken out. Now when you're attacking, you can just click and reinforce this, and you can see now I just spent the resources to resurrect that guy because he must have got killed on one of my attacks here. Otherwise, when you're attacking a location, you'll just see Honor Guard and you can click and select them there, so you don't have to go back to this map or this area to get these guys. But if you wanted to look at them a little bit more, that's how you would do it. And then this area also gives you statistics here, like how many conquests have I done, how many defensive missions have I done, you know, how many kills have I gotten, in case you're trying to keep track of, am I going to get close to those other pieces of war gear that has those kind of cutoffs here. In terms of the strongholds, I actually think the Chaos Stronghold is actually a pretty difficult one for the Necrons, especially if you make it to be the last stronghold like what I did, because they attack you with a bunch of elite berserkers, which are extremely high-powered AP melee units, and that's something that'll just completely devastate the Necrons. And so these guys like almost beat me back a little bit, so that can be very difficult. I think the Tau have one of the hardest, most annoying missions out of all the factions. Strongholds, so you know, if you're getting in this game, the earlier you attack a stronghold, the less powerful it's going to be, and they won't use all their elite units and be attacking you as much. So if you're trying to min-max this, like I said, the Tau, I'd probably take them out pretty early. You would consider taking out the Necrons pretty early too. If you're going to try to totally take out the webway gates and beat by just a total victory instead of doing the objective, then you probably want to do the Eldar a little bit early. But if you're going to just do it late game, that's usually not too bad of a mission to do. The Space Marines can be annoying if you leave them to be late game, because then they'll start attacking you with their super elite First Company guys, which are like super buffed up tactical Marines with powerful loadouts. The Orcs are pretty easy, so you can do that at any time, and if you want to wait to make them a little bit later game, that's not an issue. And the same thing with the Imperial Guard here. Your Necron units counteract them so badly that you can do that at any time. And in fact, I think I was sitting here farming the Imperial Guard to just help me get those defensive missions. But in retrospect, I probably should have just came up here and taken this out, because the Eldar will viciously attack you, trying to bust out of their corner as you start to box them in as you're pushing up here. So I hope that helps. Those are kind of my main techniques and strategies that I used as the Necrons here. And like I said, it made it for a very easy campaign overall. So I think if you're kind of doing these things, you're real aggressive up front, buff up your faction wide, so no matter what kind of map you're doing, these things will help you, and then picking and choosing whatever you think is going to be most helpful with your play style in terms of your honor guard. Just be careful you don't deploy yourself so closely to a multiple enemy factions where they're just going to be attacking you every turn, because that's how they can start to whittle you down. And then you can start to get a little bit annoyed because you're like, oh my god, I have to do this mission again. I've done this mission like 6 times. I don't want to keep doing it. So that's kind of the trick there. But if you're playing this aggressively and you can keep your units alive, especially your honor guard, you should have the requisition get built up. So every time you're ready to take out another HQ, you should have enough requisition that you can then do the forward base, assuming you've captured this location, to expedite your play time, because it probably shaves off 5 to 7 minutes off of one of these stronghold missions by not having to wait for that resource generation. And while that doesn't seem like a lot when you're talking about having to take out 5+ bases, that's almost 40 minutes of play time, if not more, because how many factions are there? Shoot, Commander. Yeah, so there's 6 of them. So let's say it saves 7 minutes. That's 42 minutes of your life you're getting back just by saving up a little bit of requisition. So definitely makes sense for you to do that on a lot of those things. So with that, I'm going to sign off here for the day. I hope you're enjoying these videos. If you are, please give my channel a like and subscribe. Encourage me to post more content for you. Have a great day.